Hey YouTube, back here with another update on the Cockshutt 40 restoration. Today I've been working on my power steering alternator bracket combo, coming up with a little more permanent solution that allows me to get all the adjustments I need for both belts. I'm running a dual belt setup, which is not the original setup. Originally this just would have had a 6-volt generator that sat right back in here. These two bolts right here would have been for the original bracket, and I mean, it was a beast. It was kind of a big monolithic looking thing, about the same size as a starter, so it was giant. I had this power steering pump that came, my grandpa kind of had tucked away in a box that he said he had used on this tractor, but it had developed some leaks or something to that effect, and he had always had problems with it deadheading when you're at the full limits of the steering, which I soon found out had to do with the type of fitting he was using on the outlet port. There's actually a very small orifice here that allows high pressure oil to bleed back into the return circuit, and the fitting he had in there was like, so the threads of this go like almost all the way back into here. He had that sucker like threaded all the way in there, and it was blocking that return orifice. So hopefully I won't have that problem. And as far as the leaks go, the gaskets on this thing were totally schwacked. I mean, they looked good. They had some steel spacers in them. They don't make these parts anymore. Eaton has the parts in their catalog, but I'll be danged if I can find them. So you know, I ended up making my own, and using copious amounts of ultra black. I'm hoping that's gonna do the job. But when I had those original gaskets in there, it seemed like it was gonna be fine. Put fluid in it, sucker just leaked like a sieve. So I'm hoping I'm not going to have that problem anymore. Everything else seems fine. The Charlene unit is pretty tight, so I'm expecting that you know, new hoses, new seals, this sucker's not going to be a problematic. But getting back to the original conversation here, I get rid of all that stuff because I hate 6-volt systems. I hate 6-volt negative ground systems. They're pretty unreliable, and if they're well maintained, they are reliable, but they're just weak. They don't stand the test of time. And their biggest problem, I think, is not the fact that they're engineered poorly. I think they were engineered with the knowledge and the know-how of the time. But the biggest problem was the battery technology, right? I mean, you can't get a sealed, I mean, you probably can, but it's going to cost you a small fortune. You can't get like a sealed, maintenance-free 6-volt battery that doesn't suck or doesn't cost a lot of money. So I've done this on pretty much all the tractors I've ever worked on. I've always converted them over to 12 volts, and I never had problems with them. They always have plenty of power to start. I don't have to keep them on battery maintainers, and they got plenty of juice, and they got plenty of energy for the ignition system too. So so I converted this over, and in doing so, I had to find a place for this guy to live because I didn't have any of the brackets for it. I had to find a place for this guy to live, and also pack an alternator in there. So it's proving to be a very tight package, but I know I've got clearance because I had the radiator in here about a week ago. I mocked it up. I made sure I had plenty of space for the alternator belt between there, and you know, I've got some very, very tight space in here between these, but if it's all locked down and solid, they do have clearance. So as long as I got clearance, I'm happy camper. So the bracket itself, I had a simpler version. I had done this when I kind of had this mocked up when I had the engine out of the frame, and it fit, it looked good, but in reality this wasn't practical because At some point in time, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to put an alternator on there, and it's like, oh shoot. And when I installed this, like, it fit okay on the engine stand, but when I installed it in the frame, it's like, oh crap, everything's crashing. Long story short, it's one of those deals where I kind of had to mock it up on the engine. So what I did was I took this guy, I cut it to pieces, and because this this yoke fit my power steering pump bolt pattern, and I got basically all my information I needed, right? So I had to establish not only the height from the mounting point on the engine, I had to establish the height of where that pump needed to live, but also I had to figure out the offset and the positioning of where I needed to have a pivot point for my alternator that would clear the frame and also give me enough adjustment to tension the belt. So kind of started with this, and then kind of going maximum effort with the old school techniques. Just started drawing it out. Got a piece of butcher paper here. Just started drawing it out, making some patterns. You know, cutting stuff out, making patterns, cutting them out of steel. I made this all out of 1/4-inch plate steel, so it's freaking beefcake. And the cool part about doing it this way is, I mean, it's like you know, it's like fun with paper, but it's also cool because if you got movable features, you can actually pin them. You can pin them on your master, and figure out where your pivot points are and stuff. And you can, like, as long as you got, you know, accurate templates, you can like see how this thing's going to pivot. So it's kind of a neat way to do it. Pretty old school. So I started working that up, and on this bracket, what I ended up with was I attacked it from the top side. I put a high pivot point on it because then now my pump can adjust up to tension my main fan belt. Originally, this had provisions to tension the fan belt by clocking the water pump, which I didn't see that as like a really cool method to do it. It does have it has some pretty tight, I'd say some pretty tight tolerances on the port. Basically, if you look at that port with this was taken off, it's almost like divided into two halves of a circle. So one's suction, the other's you know, the pressurized output. So if you clock it, you kind of lose that port volume. I figured that's not really ideal. So what I did was I made a template of that, lined it up with the template of this, and figured out where that needed to live so that way my ports were lined. And then I made a little linkage bracket. Normally this would have been an adjuster, kind of like something like that. Would have been an adjuster so you can clock it to get your belt to tension. So I kind of threw that idea away in lieu of a more elegant solution. So I came at this from the top, and I put two adjustments in it. Number one, this pivot point establishes the rock of my pump independent of the other stuff. It allows you to rock the pump up, which gives you tension on your fan belt. Okay, and then what I also did was there's 2 points on the yoke that just mount the pump itself, and I slotted the interior one, if I can get a photo of it, which I might make a little tweak to it because I'm at the top of my travel right now. But what that allows you to do is take the pump, once you get the pump and the fan belt aligned where you want it, it allows you to rotate it so that way it's not like tipped in or tipped out and looks stupid, right? So this gives me 2 points of adjustment so I can get that sucker right where I want it. And then off of this end I just have a pivot point to mount my alternator, the top of my alternator, and that allows it to rotate outward to put tension on this belt, and then it'll have a fixed pivot as tight as I can get it, because I'm dangerously close to touching that belt there. But I have enough space in here to mount a pivot that'll go back to the bottom of this piece of plate. So I got to take the information off my other bracket, build out the offset, and then put something to tie that down to that pivot point. So that's basically where it's at right now. Again, the tooling to do this, pretty easy. I mean, obviously you got to be able to weld, and you got to be able to cut all these, you know, thick metal plate parts out. But I think anybody with an angle grinder, or even a, you know, a little torch, just use a cutting torch. That's well within the capability of a cutting torch, some file work, a grinder. But I got to get a new blade. My blade is schwacked, but this little guy is awesome. This little portable bandsaw used for cutting metal. This thing makes really short work of cutting all that plate up. So that came out super handy. But again, if you don't have that, and you know, you can always use an angle grinder, you know, cutting torch, whatever. I mean, if you wanted to, you can make this totally out of hand tools. So that's where I'm at. I'll post another update as soon as I get this thing all finished out. There is one more piece of this. I kind of have this rough cut up top here, because I have one more piece that I need to provide mounting points for. So on the power steering motor itself, this was the, I guess I could call it, original bracket that came with the motor, but this looks freaking handmade. You know, it might have been something my grandpa made, I don't know. But it had what looked like the clevises on like one of your pedals. It had a couple of these guys hanging off of it with some all thread, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me where those things attach to. I have no clue how he had this thing mounted in here. So that was a complete mystery. So, and he's gone now, so I can't, it's not like I can go knock on his door and ask him, and even if I did, he'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So so my plan is, I can extend this plate over and pick up another attachment point, so that way I've got all of this stuff firmly and rigidly mounted by 3 points. So this whole bracket will be tied in with these two big old 7/16 bolts, and then have another attachment point probably where this little pump linkage was. I'll just take that out and put a long bolt through and have a spacer in there that's in plane with this guy. Come off and put an ear on that, so that way I've got a nice piece of metal plate up here that I can figure out some attachment scheme. Because basically what you need to do on this guy is you gotta have something to react the torque, right? So whether you're manually steering it, or whether you're or whether you got the engine running and it's pumping fluid, this sucker's gonna twist, right? So you don't want this thing whipping around in there. So you gotta have it secured to something. So my plan is to get some big tube stock, some square tube, and come up with a little bit of a ladder bracket that ties into two spread out points on the bottom here, so that way you've got a nice vertical reaction surface for the torque reaction on this guy. So that's gonna happen here, probably not this weekend. I mean, it's like, I'm looking at the clock now, it's like almost 1 1 in the morning, so I'm beat. I'm ready to cash in. I'm like a can of Skull and like 5 Miller Lights deep, so I'm pretty much done tonight. But I think that's the only real piece of fabrication I got left. I got my radiator core on order because the old one is complete junk. So I'm just waiting on that. As soon as I get that radiator core back, I can get that all soldered back in and to my my top and bottom tanks. Get that sucker plot back in there, and I think once I have that done and all this stuff buttoned up, I mean, I'm ready to put some fuel in it and give it a little light off. So you know, winter's setting in, so I'm sure I'm going to be playing with this more often as my options on television run out. So if you like, or if you have any questions on this stuff, I've been through this whole tractor at this point. If you like any of this stuff, or you have any questions on it, if you want to talk tractors, or I don't know, if you want to talk machines or home hobby junk, just drop me a comment, like, subscribe. I hope to hear from you. Everyone have a good night.